This is Captain Darvo's True Tales, completely factual maritime adventures, printed somewhere near the equator. Episode 3, the RSYC Otter Offensive. Captain Darvo and Finnigan returned to their home berth at Republic of Singapore Yacht Club after a routine engine service on the Nordic 26. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The car park was half empty. The club restaurant smelled like laksa. 3 uncles were drinking tiger at the bar, arguing passionately about the pool table. The pool table that was removed. The pool table that had been gone for 6 months. The pool table whose absence had created a void in the social fabric of RSYC that no amount of committee meetings could fill. Uncle Hung insisted it was removed for safety reasons. Uncle Tan insisted it was removed because Uncle Stephen lost on it and took it personally. Uncle Chong insisted there was never a pool table and that everyone was thinking of the other club. Nobody agreed. Nobody would ever agree. This argument would outlive all 3 of them. This was the yacht club on a quiet day. This was home. Except today, home had been invaded. 37 smooth-coated otters, the infamous Bishan family and what appeared to be 2 allied clans who had formed a military coalition, had occupied the marina pontoon. Not visiting, occupied. They were on the dock. They were under the dock. They were on the swim platforms of 3 super yachts worth more than most people's houses. One otter was asleep inside a deck shoe on a 90-foot sunseeker. Another had left a half-eaten fish on the teak deck of a Beneteau called Viva Lass. A third was sliding repeatedly down a fender like a water park. The yacht club committee had convened an emergency meeting. Finnigan discovered this when he walked into the club bar, barefoot, and was immediately stopped at the door by Auntie Susan, the bar manager, who had worked at the yacht club longer than the building had existed and whose authority exceeded that of the entire committee combined.
Cannot. No shoes, no entry.
Finnigan looked down at his feet, looked at Auntie Susan, looked back at his feet.
Auntie, I don't own shoes.
Then you don't own a seat at the bar.
I've never worn shoes. I'm philosophically opposed.
Philosophy also cannot come in without shoes.
I'm a member.
You're a member with no shoes. 2 different things.
Finnigan stood at the door of the bar, looking in at 12 committee members seated around a table with folders, printed agendas, and a PowerPoint presentation titled Otter Mitigation Strategy, Phase 1. The meeting had been going for 2 hours. He could see it. He could hear it. He could not enter it. He was a barefoot refugee from his own yacht club. Darvo walked past him wearing boat shoes, looked down at Finnigan's feet, didn't say a word, walked into the bar, sat down, ordered a beer. Finnigan watched from the doorway like a child outside a sweet shop. The meeting had been going for 2 hours. No decisions had been made. A motion to strongly discourage the otters through signage had been tabled, debated, amended, debated again, and sent to a subcommittee for review. The subcommittee consisted of 3 men who were also on the main committee. Uncle Stephen, a retired shipping executive who had been on the committee longer than some members had been alive, and whose super yacht hadn't left the berth since 2019 but was polished weekly by a crew of 3, was chairing the meeting. He was furious, not at the otters, at the fact that someone had suggested the otters might actually be good for the club's image. Uncle Stephen did not care about image. Uncle Stephen cared about his teak deck. Uncle Stephen also cared about procedure. Uncle Stephen once called a point of order during a conversation about parking. He was the kind of man who read the minutes of previous meetings for fun and considered Robert's Rules of Order light bedtime reading. Captain Darvo sat at the table. Every head turned. He was one of maybe 6 non-Singaporean members. He was tolerated because his boats were beautiful, he paid his fees on time, and he once fixed Uncle Stephen's generator during a blackout using a paperclip and a beer can. This had given him permanent diplomatic immunity. Uncle Stephen pointed at Darvo.
You, boatman, you know animals, fix this.
Darvo looked at Finnigan standing in the doorway. Finnigan shrugged helplessly. Darvo looked at the PowerPoint. Slide 4 was a pie chart showing Otter incident reports by Pontoon. Slide 7 was a risk matrix. Slide 12 was a photograph of otter droppings on the Viva Lass with a red circle around it and the caption Exhibit A. Darvo took a sip of his beer, studied the situation.
How many otters?
37. We counted.
You counted.
Kenneth counted. Kenneth has binoculars.
Kenneth, a quiet man in a fishing hat who had been a member since 1987, nodded solemnly. He held up a notebook. He had sketched a map of otter positions like a military intelligence officer. Each otter had been assigned a grid reference. Finnigan leaned in from the doorway, his feet still technically outside the bar, and looked at the map.
Brew, this man has marked individual otters. This one is labeled Big Boss. This one says the one that bit Stephen.
That otter bit my shoe. It was a Ferragamo.
Was it on your foot at the time?
That is not the point.
It is very much the point, Stephen.
The point is that an otter attacked committee property.
Your foot is committee property.
My shoe was purchased at the committee dinner. It was expensed. So yes.
The committee tasked Darvo with resolving the otter situation through what Uncle Stephen called practical marine intervention, and what Finnigan later described as 2 blokes with a boat hook being asked to relocate an apex predator that has the full legal protection of the Singapore government. Darvo accepted, not because he thought he could move the otters, because the committee had promised free berthing for a month, and he had never in his life turned down free berthing. They headed to the marina. Finnigan was visibly relieved to be leaving a building that didn't want his feet. The pontoon was chaos. Otters everywhere, sliding off swim platforms, wrestling on dock lines. A family of 12 had colonized the foredeck of the Whale Explorer. Uncle Frank's pride and joy, a converted dive boat that he claimed had been to the Maldives twice, but that nobody had ever seen leave Pontoon D. Uncle Frank was standing on the dock in his boat shoes and pressed shorts, photographing the otters for insurance purposes while muttering in Hokkien. He had a dive flag in one hand as if the otters might respect maritime dive regulations. Uncle Frank had been telling everyone for 3 years that the Whale Explorer was ready for an expedition. The expedition had not happened. The Whale Explorer's most significant voyage had been from berth 14 to berth 16 during a pontoon reshuffle. The otters were the most exciting thing that had happened on Uncle Frank's boat since the engine last started, which was an event so rare that Kenneth logged it in his notebook. Finnigan stepped onto Pontoon C and immediately slipped on otter droppings. He went down hard, both feet in the air, barefoot on otter waste. He lay on the dock staring at the sky, reconsidering every life choice that led to this moment.
Darvo,
Yes, Finnigan.
I have otter shit on my back.
That's what shoes are for.
Don't you start.
Auntie Susan tried to tell you.
Auntie Susan is a bar manager, not a prophet.
Today she was both.
They attempted Phase 1, making noise. Finnigan banged the boat hook on the dock. The otters looked at him with the collective indifference of creatures who had faced monitor lizards, crocodiles, and the entire Singapore River, and had decided that a barefoot man with a stick was not remotely threatening. One otter yawned. It was the most devastating insult Finnigan had ever received. Phase 2, the hose. Darvo connected the dock hose and sprayed water toward the otters. The otters loved it. They played in the spray. More otters arrived. A mother otter pushed her pups into the spray like a woman who had found a free splash pad. The situation had worsened. There were now 42 otters. 5 new ones had arrived because word had spread in the otter community that the yacht club had water features. Phase 3. Fish bribery. Finnigan got a bucket of leftover bait fish from the club freezer and attempted to lure the otters off the pontoon and toward the seawall. This worked for approximately 45 seconds until the otters ate all the fish and returned to the pontoon. They now associated the Nordic 26 with free food. 6 otters climbed onto the Nordic swim platform and refused to leave. One had made itself comfortable on the teal sun pad. It looked more relaxed than any human had ever looked on that sun pad. Finnigan considered charging it berthing fees. Back at the bar, Uncle Stephen was watching through the window. He called Darvo on the phone.
What is happening? There are more otters now than when you started.
Your assessment is correct.
You were supposed to reduce the otter count, not increase it.
The otters have a different interpretation of the brief.
This is unacceptable. I'm calling N Parks.
In Parks will tell you the otters are protected and to stop bothering them.
Then I'll call the committee.
You are the committee, Stephen.
I'll call a subcommittee.
That's also you.
The lady in red, who had been in the club restaurant the entire time eating chili crab and watching through the window, walked down to the marina. She was wearing heels on the pontoon. She did not slip. The otter droppings parted for her. Finnigan noticed this and filed it under things that are unfair. She stood at the top of the ramp, looked at the otter-covered marina, looked at Finnigan lying in otter droppings with no shoes, looked at Darvo spraying a hose at otters who were treating it like a resort amenity, and said,
"Have you tried asking them to leave?"
Nobody laughed, because 15 seconds later she walked onto Pontoon C, clapped her hands twice, and 37 otters turned, looked at her, and began sliding off the pontoon into the water in an orderly single-file line. The 5 new arrivals followed. In 90 seconds, the pontoon was clear. The otter on the Nordic sun pad was the last to leave. It looked at her. She looked at it. It slid off the swim platform with what can only be described as respect. She walked back to the restaurant.
They were finished anyway. The tide's changing.
Darvo stared at the empty pontoon. Finnigan stared at the empty pontoon. Uncle Stephen stared at the empty pontoon from the bar window. Uncle Frank photographed the empty pontoon for his insurance claim. Kenneth updated his notebook. He wrote, "Lady in red, 2 claps, full evacuation, 90 seconds, mechanism unknown." The committee spent the next 3 hours debating whether to formally thank the lady in red or to formally investigate how she did it. A motion was raised to award her honorary membership. An amendment was proposed to first determine her actual name. The amendment was sent to subcommittee. The subcommittee was the same 3 men. They reported back that they were unable to determine her name. She told them later. The motion was tabled indefinitely. A second motion was raised to reinstall the pool table as a morale measure following the otter crisis. Uncle Stephen ruled it out of order. Uncle Heng objected. Uncle Tan seconded the objection. The argument about the pool table resumed as if the otters had never happened. It would continue until the heat death of the universe. Darvo got his free berthing. The otters returned the following Tuesday. Kenneth logged it. Uncle Stephen called an emergency meeting. The PowerPoint was updated. Slide count, now 24. As Darvo and Finnigan walked back to the Nordic, Finnigan spotted something at the end of Pontoon D, a monitor lizard, 2 meters long, sitting on the dock like it owned the lease. It was sitting next to the whale explorer as if it too was waiting for Uncle Frank's expedition that would never happen. It looked at Finnigan. Finnigan looked at it. It didn't blink. It had the patient, calculating energy of something that had been watching for weeks.
Davo, what is that?
Davo glanced at it, kept walking.
That's next month's problem, Finnigan.
It's looking at me.
Everything looks at you, Finnigan. You're barefoot in a yacht club. You're a spectacle.
The monitor lizard watched them leave. It had plans, it had patience, and unlike the otters, it did not respond to clapping. Cap'n Davo's true tales will return. Next episode, the giant squid. Davo and Finnigan were motoring through open water at dusk. The sea was flat, too flat. Finnigan was at the bow watching the depth sounder.
Davo, the depth just went from 40 meters to 12.
You're not near a reef.
I know we're not near a reef.
A long pause. The boat rocked. Something large moved beneath them.
That's not a reef, Finnigan.
What is it? Something that doesn't want us here?
A tentacle broke the surface 30 meters to starboard. Thick, red-brown, covered in suckers the size of dinner plates. It rose 2 meters out of the water, hung in the air for 3 seconds, and slid back under without a sound. Finnigan stared at the water. His mouth was open. No words came out.
Finnigan,
Yeah,
get the lady below deck.
she's not gonna go below deck.
I'm not going below deck. The monster got me in his tentacle.
Fair enough.
Cap'n Davo's True Tales, completely factual maritime adventures, printed somewhere near the equator.